I am Anil Kumar sharing with you a test problem on inverse function. The question is, find inverse of f of x equals to minus square root of x plus 5 and evaluate f inverse of minus 2. At this stage, I'd like you to pause the video, solve the question, and then look into my suggestions. Now, in my solution, I'd like to warn you that there are possibilities of making error for solving such a question. So I'll show you alternate ways of solving and how should we avoid mistakes. So that's the whole idea of taking up this question at this stage. Now when we say find inverse of f of x equals to minus square root of x plus 5, then to find inverse, what we should do? We can write this function in the form of y equals to minus square root of x plus 5, and then the first stage is swap x and y, right? Then we swap, right, x and y to evaluate the inverse. And if we swap x and y, we get x is equals to minus square root of y plus 5. Now to solve this, what we are going to do? We are going to square both sides. That means we'll square, that means we'll do x square, and then we'll do minus square root of y plus 5 whole square, correct? Now you can see here we are squaring minus thing, right, and equating it to something else, which actually is kind of wrong. It creates an error at this stage. So whenever you are solving a radical equation, always there is a possibility. You're well aware of that. So you have to be careful now that there is a possibility of error here, and so we have to be careful as how to avoid this error, and that is main objective of this video. So at this stage I'll just move on and say, well, at this stage I can say x square equals to square of negative thing is positive and square of square root is just y plus 5 is what I get, right? So that is what I get. And now I can solve for y, and I say, well, y equals to x square minus 5, and I can write this as f inverse x equals to x square minus 5. Now at least the good thing is I know there is an error, right? So I know there is possibility of error at this stage, right? So let me write here possible error. Okay, so there is a possible error here. Now we'll see how to figure out that error in different ways so that you understand it and you don't, get it wrong when you really do it in your test paper. So first way is, this is a given function, so let's do it here itself. Let's try to sketch the function f of x. Now f of x is minus, that means it is reflected on x-axis. X plus 5 means square root function is translated 5 units left, so it starts from here and kind of goes down like this. So that is the function f of x for us. Now at this stage we can say, well, this point should be minus square root of 5, right? If x is 0, we get minus square root of 5, and this point should be minus 5 for us. Now to find the inverse of this function, we need to really reflect it on a line which is y equals to x, right? So if we reflect this on the line y equals to x, graphically we can get our function. So when you reflect, this minus 5 will be kind of coming here, correct? Reflected on this, right? So it's not very accurate, but well, I know since this is minus square root 5, minus 5 is going to be much larger, so it's kind of here, okay? And this is invariant point, so my graph should be kind of like this. Is that okay? Okay, so I just drawn it. Now since we didn't calculate any values, but we know one thing now, that the inverse is kind of like this, which really gives us an idea that the x value is less than equal to 0. And that is probably the mistake which we have made, that we have not restricted the domain to less than equal to 0. Now if you look back, it makes sense. When we say minus square root of 5 plus x, in that case we are looking in first half, we are not looking into plus part. Do you see that? So the inverse here, when we squared this term minus, that means we are looking into one half of this parabola, and the half which we are interested in is where x is less than or equal to 0. So we should put the restriction here, that is x is less than or equal to 0, and we should continue with this restriction. And once we do that, then we get the right solution, right? So that is the solution we are really looking for. So that's one way to avoid the mistake. I hope that makes things very clear, right? So important note, right? So the note here is include restriction. So whenever you're solving radical equations, there are restrictions, right? So you have to include those restrictions. Now, alternate way to find restriction is, let me give you alternate way method to find restriction, right? How to find restrictions. So this time what I will do is, let's start with the function itself. So the function given to us is f of x equals to minus square root of x plus 5. What is domain and range for this function? To find domain, let's calculate domain, right? To find domain, x plus 5 should be greater than or equal to 0. So that gives me that x should be greater than or equal to minus 5. Is that okay? That's the domain. And range for the function is that since it is reflected down, right? So instead of greater than or equal to 0, y value is less than or equal to 0. So that is the domain and range for the given function. Now, what is the domain and range for inverse function? As you know, for inverse function, this swaps. Is that okay? So if I swap it, I can write domain. Let me write domain range for inverse as d inverse. So that's kind of clear. Should be that x should be less than or equal to 0, and range for my function should be like this, right? That means y, because we replace x and y for inverse, right? So if you replace x and y, what do you get? You get y greater than or equal to minus 5. Do you see that? So that becomes the restrictions on your inverse. So I suggest that when you get a question like this, you can work out on domain range for the function and its inverse. Now you are very clear that in this solution, what is to be included? The domain restriction, which is x less than or equal to 0. Correct? So I hope now that makes sense. Do you see that part? So this is what really is important for you to understand and to avoid this huge mistake which I've seen so many times in the test papers, right? So that's why I hope that's worth taking it at this stage, right? I hope you like it. Now let's look into the second part, and which is evaluate. So now let us evaluate f inverse of minus 2, right? Now since we know what is inverse function, it is f inverse of minus 2 should be how much? So we say f inverse of minus 2 is equals to, we'll replace x with minus 2 here, equals to minus 2 square minus 5, and that is indeed 4 minus 5 equals to minus 1, right? And so we get our answer, right? So we get both the answers, and the solutions are that, let me highlight this in this fashion. So the inverse of the function is kind of like this, correct? Include restriction, otherwise it will be incorrect. And f inverse is equals to minus 1, right? So this is equals to minus 1, right? So that is how you solve this question. I hope it's absolutely clear. Thank you and all the best.